although my presentation couldn't be more different, to my predecessor who was speaking on a very, technical level, mine will be more on a very high level, conceptual level. I think it would be something that you might be interested in, and probably gives you here or there some more insight on things you have not known so far, because otherwise, why should you be here? And this is the same reason why I am here, because I would like to pick and learn from others as well. Who am I? I'm actually leading the strategy, research, and policy group in the corporate affairs group at Intel. It's part of the corporate affairs group, which also includes the Intel Foundation. And we are working together with higher education institutes like universities, but also colleges or research centers, as well as ministries of education all over the world, in order to help to make technology effectively used in the classroom and really adapt to the needs. And although I wanted to have actually one of my team members here, John Price, to present, I decided to do it on my own, given that I'm back in Berlin, which is where I come from. And so I took the opportunity to present and be with you here today. And as you can see, also Julia, we always have PhD students with us, giving them the opportunity to look into what we are doing at an early stage. So this is a different computer than mine. Let me just see. Just go with the enter, it's not moving forward. Let me see this one. Okay, I guess just neither this one?
No, just space.
Yeah, probably. Let me take this one, it's much more mobile. Okay, so why are we, and corporate affairs in Intel means that we are working big focus on education. I described big focus on education. I described a little bit more about it before, but also environmental protection and many, many other things. But when we look into education, we took it from a holistic side. In other words, about 7 years ago, when the world was still isolatedly looking at ICT in education or curricula or teacher professional development, we said it's not good enough. If you want to have an education reform, you need to have a total reform of different vectors. So we were focusing on curricula and assessment, a very big area that was at that time not well developed, we feel. Professional development for teachers, and this is clearly something that we are, I think, one of the leading players in this area with more than 12 million teachers trained worldwide in the effective use of technology in the classroom. And this is not how to use the computer. It's really how to design a lesson plan and a year plan in order to make come up with results that prove student learning for better results. We drive research and evaluation and sustainable resourcing. Sustainable resourcing means that we would need to make sure that organizations like the World Bank, UNESCO, OECD, and many, many others would help to coordinate the approach, especially in the emerging world, to make sure that kids there have the same opportunities than in countries like Germany, the United States, or you name it. And in the middle, on the center of the focus is clearly the student. And when we talk about student success, it's always learning progression. It's not just a certificate. It's not just, a grade. It's really how a student progresses in order to get a job at the end of the day. Because as you can see, employment and social economic empowerment is one of the clear objectives we want to achieve with that approach. And in order to give the country a chance to be more competitive compared to others, as well as contribute to a citizenship and social equity. So those are the drivers for what we are doing. And given that we are talking with leaders in the countries, clearly leadership and policy are two major areas that we are working with governments as well as university administration big time in order to help advise what is needed in the working market later on. So what is needed for the workforce that we, for instance, need in ICT or our other fellow industry players. So that is the driver behind it. Now, all that is research-based. So what we came up with, I think more than 500 researchers all over the world, as well as policy leaders, is really research-based in the different areas that I just showed in this holistic approach. We wanted to make sure at the end of the day that when we are talking about learning, this is always student-centered, project-based, and collaborative, really something that we need in the work. We also added the 21st century skills. You all heard about it, critical thinking, decision making, problem solving, collaborative problem solving, but also, social competency, because that's what's at the end important in our industry. Otherwise, if I have the best specialist who is a mathematician and is not able to collaborate, it's very, very difficult to be integrated in the team, and so on and so forth. And of course, it's also critical that we have an aligned strategic planning, that the infrastructure, be it in universities, be it in schools, research centers, is something that is really state-of-the-art compared to the economic market. And what you can see here, a little bit disrupted, but is the paradigm shift that we believe in. Learning is not what I'm doing now. I'm teaching and you're learning. No, you're not learning. You're just listening, and maybe a fraction of what I said is something that you got out of it. In reality, what you need is the interaction, round tables, challenging, and discussion, something we will do later. So, however, in my summary of the paper that you all have access to, and I worked together with two people mainly that were here on the first slide, is about assessment, an area that, especially for schools, people would think, or governments would think of PISA. And you all know, oh my God, this is just a snapshot of 4 years, summative assessment. Well, is that what we really need? Question mark. And we discussed it with Andrea Schleicher, the head of PISA, as you know. And I will show more about the relevance. Critical assessment issue is something we worked with Linda Darling-Hammond. She is the lead advisor for the Obama administration in the US. She is from Stanford University, as you might know, the leading force of assessment. And she was actually on our team of a project I will talk about later. And we are working closely together. I'm also showing why the shift of measurement to 21st century skills is so critical, and why it does include, in fact, all the factual subjects knowledge, be it mathematics, physics, you name it. Global collaboration, why, and assessment for learning as a conclusion. So the approaches. You all know about the tests, examinations, certifications. The Fern University of Hagen is a classic example. You need this because you want to apply for a job, and it's critical. But that's just one thing, and we all know it's not good enough nowhere in the world. We're all challenged with the same thing. The large-scale assessment, like for instance PISA, where you compare one country against the other, is another very important, high sophisticated thing and critical, but does it help me individually as a parent, or my students, or the companies? Question mark. It's something that helps facilitating the discussion. Because what really is critical, be it in the classroom or the college room or whatever place you need, you have, is I need to be able constantly to assess the learning progression of an individual student, and not only when he works on his own, but when he works with other students together. In other words, in teams. I should be able to assess the team, individually the student, and I should be able to do that every day so that I see the curve. So that I, as a teacher, master, whatever, trainer, can advise what this individual should do. And then the progression over a year is much more important than the grade. And I think we all agree. Now, what are the real issues? We still have whatever country in the world, most of the time, we really focus on the factual recall. In other words, what are the data you know in mathematics? What are your data you know in even theology, language, whatsoever? That's what is still focused on. The test for minimum competency. I'm not talking multiple choice. Even another test, open-ended test, is something that is existing. Is it sufficient? Question mark. The measurement of student capabilities. So at a state level, there are, of course, guidelines how tests have to happen in order to compare students against each other. But this is, again, just one piece of the big puzzle. Instructions are very narrowly focused on curricula. Summative examinations. I talked about PISA, which is a classic example. TIMSS from the International Assessment Institute is another one. or the narrow-based multiple choice designs that you have heard about. What we really need, though, and this is what we came up in the paper with, and not just on a hypothetical basis, but we proved the concept by different measurements, and I'm not going into technical level, I have not the time, but you can see in the sources in the paper all the references. What we really need is to serve the student learning, and this is what I meant before. It is critical to see the progression of the student. I need to see how this aligns to the curriculum and whether it meets the performance criteria. We need to see that the student engages authentically. This is an emphasis, therefore I put it in blue. Real world issues is what we need in school. It's not theory. Well, I think you need some improvement on the technology side here. See what he told me, if I'm walking here, you can't hear me. See, my audio is lost. Okay, so going back, real problems. That means we need real problems in schools, in universities whatsoever. So one of the reasons why we work with university and say, here's a real problem. This is what the market needs. Do you want to do it? We give them early technology to figure it out. And then when they come up with a result, we give them the chance to win big, grants, to say the least. So most important also, and this has to start in school. It's something that we need to work on. I was in Brazil, fantastic professor. He leads one of the best, in my opinion, best universities in the world in a real small township, Sao Paulo. What he is doing is he changed completely the curriculum, and he said, I'm starting to build a bicycle. So the primary level kids are building a bicycle, and all they need, be it mathematics, physics, language, whatsoever, to build this bicycle, he's teaching them. And then he goes to a car, and then he goes to a plane. And I tell you, within 2.5 years, he improved the results that 82% of his kids were in fact making the national curriculum. Never, ever before. So that's what I'm trying to say. Not only it's authentic, but also it got the attention and improved learning. So now, to provide feedback is, when it comes to assessment, is very critical for the teacher, of course. You want to see how your students are doing, or the professor. You know, teacher in American, by the way, we always use for professors as well. But we need to also give it to the student, same time. And we need to give it to whoever needs it, the school, the parents, whoever, in order to make sure that we help them to improve. And for that reason, it's not only important to say what they achieved, but how they achieved it. With perceptual computing, it's not a big deal. You know it, right? We can not only by audio observe what students are doing when they are working together, we have sensitive audiovisual systems. We can really recognize how they are giving the inputs. We can see how they interact with each other. And I'll come to a project which we did under leadership from Melbourne University. Fantastic. We could measure this all like this. And in 15 minutes, you have a report. 5 minutes, nothing. Easy for the teacher, not a big deal. Quality assessment only this way is important. And the open-ended tasks, what I mean by that is really, you can't tell the students, work this problem and then give me the results that I have here already. Wrong. When I work with my team, I don't know what they will come up with as a solution. I want them to come up with something that's much better than I could think of. Exactly what a teacher should do with students. He should, rather than say, no, this is not the way you should have done that mathematical exercise, he should say, fantastic, it's a new way, you actually compelled, you did much better than me. And that's what we need to do from open-ended. Now, I talked about, I'm not going into PISA, you are, I think, all familiar what is happening there. And I think OECD, under leadership von Andreas Schleicher, does a fantastic job at that level. What we thought so is critical is measuring 21st century skills on a classroom up to the country level. And Andreas Schleicher was part of our advisory board. We had UNESCO, we had TIMSS, the chair of TIMSS, etc., of IEA. But most importantly, we had 256 researchers from all over the world, and the executive director was Patrick Griffin from the University of Melbourne, who coordinated this assessment project, ADC21S, and when you Google, you find it. And what it does is not only it was defining those skills and was saying providing the methodology, how to measure it. It was proving the concept in the classroom for 3 years. And this is the beauty of it, he was making recommendations how to do it from a teacher's perspective to improve. In other words, at the end of the day, the teacher had a set of tools in hand that he could say, okay, every day in my classroom or college or university, that's what I'm doing. And whenever I have my students creating such a project, they will come up with data at the end that are immediately put into the system. I, as a professor, don't need to do it, or teacher. They do it. The system does it. And then, with the algorithms, of course, and the technology, you get the report within 15 minutes. And he can send it to whomever he wants. You can read all about it. Later on, after 3 years, we had a company, and a couple of others as well, a startup company, in fact, jumping on it because, they liked it, we found them qualified, and they are now continuing, based on ADC21S, develop tools. But there are many, many others as well. Now, I said so many things, I don't think I need to repeat myself. At the end of the day, though, and I mentioned it once, with all the assessment we are doing, which is super complex, lots of data, the big data discussions, the security issues, all the stuff. For that reason, you have to have solid technology systems. But the most important is that then either the system or the qualified teacher knows what to do. How should she or he change the process in the classroom, and how should students work differently together? And this on an ongoing basis. In other words, everything I talked about, and this is what you see in literature, is this stuff. Research says this, and I don't need to repeat it. I'm sure you know the graphics. But with Linda, we were working, in fact, the most important part is to bring it back home. In other words, it's not good to measure the teachers, the students, blah, 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 and have the data if I'm not proposing, or we are not proposing, and this is how you need to change it. So, conclusions. Most important is that we measure the progression for teaching and learning. So it's not a status. It's really the progression continuously, so that I have a curve at the end and see how my pupils are doing, or my students. It needs to be classroom-based assessment. If summative assessment should make sense, which make sense, but they are not sufficient, we need to provide also the insights, and this is the compelling part, the insights into the student's understanding. In other words, the more we can understand what the student is thinking, challenged by, how he is interacting, the more you can observe him on a very private basis, so nobody else than the student and the more you understand where the help is needed. Technology can make that happen. The question is how we do it right, and for that reason, we need people like yourself. Everything has to be integrated in the system, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And I said this now multiple times, sorry, but let me say this at the end again. The 21st century skills are super critical, because if we don't have the so-called social skills, or social competencies, how we say it here in Europe, then all the data knowledge that is now on the internet anyway, what is it for? You need to make use of it, and this in a collective format. I thank you very much. You found a lot of this information on our website. There is also a special room for researchers and professors and higher education staff that you can access if you ask, and you get the password for.